Once promised unwavering support, Ukraine now finds itself on uncertain ground as the US redirects its focus toward negotiations with Russia. With heavy losses, economic devastation, and political turmoil, has Ukraine been used as a pawn in a larger geopolitical game? As Trump initiates direct talks with Putin, it is leaving Zelensky scrambling. What does this mean for Ukraine's future? Is this the beginning of its total collapse? Now, let's be clear, Ukraine got played hard. The world watched as promises were made and hopes were raised. Remember the early days, when world leaders were practically tripping over themselves to pledge support? It was a spectacle of unity and resolve. Biden, Johnson, they all swore up and down that Russia would be defeated. Their words echoed across the globe, instilling hope that Ukraine would have all the help it needed. Military aid, humanitarian assistance, everything was promised. Zelensky, understandably, bought into it. He believed in the strength of these promises. He told Putin, "Thanks, but no thanks to those peace talks." Big mistake and huge. The stakes were high and the gamble was risky while Putin continued conquering the eastern part. These promises from Westerns just empty words. They were backed by billions in military aid, humanitarian assistance, you name it. The world seemed united. The message was clear: we got your back, Ukraine. In fact, solidarity was the mantra. Only turns out they didn't, or at least, not for as long as Ukraine needed. The support waned. Now, I'm not saying those initial pledges were entirely cynical. There was genuine intent. I think maybe they actually believed it and the leaders wanted to help. The problem is, somewhere along the line, the West got distracted or bored. Then priorities were shifted, or, more likely, realized this whole helping Ukraine thing was going to cost them more than they were willing to pay. The economic toll was too high. And so, the promises, once so loud and clear, started to fade. The enthusiasm dwindled. Like a whisper on the wind, the echoes of those promises now barely audible. Let's not sugarcoat this. Ukraine is paying the price for the West's fickle morals and affections. The promises of support and solidarity have often been more symbolic than substantial, and I'm not talking about a few $billion here and there. The financial aid, while significant, pales in comparison to the human suffering. I'm talking about a human cost that's almost impossible to comprehend. Hundreds of thousands of dead, millions displaced, cities reduced to rubble. The emotional and psychological toll is immeasurable. The economy, forget about it. Businesses are shuttered and the once thriving markets are now ghost towns. It's the geopolitical equivalent of a dumpster fire. The instability has ripple effects far beyond Ukraine's borders and imagination. The only thing keeping Ukraine afloat is the kindness of strangers, the tireless efforts of volunteers and aid workers. And even that well is starting to run dry. Resources are depleting and the world's attention is waning. The West, it seems, has developed a bad case of donor fatigue. The initial outpouring of support is fading. Can't say I blame them. Wars are expensive. The financial strain is felt globally, but why did they allow the military actions happening instead of prioritizing political negotiations? Still, you'd think they'd have factored that in before they went around making promises they couldn't keep. The consequences of these broken promises are dire. And speaking of broken promises, how about that whole NATO membership thing? Yeah, that's not happening. Not now, not ever. Turns out having Ukraine as a buffer zone between Russia and the West isn't such a bad deal after all. But what is about of Ukraine's sovereignty? Who cares if it means sacrificing a few million Ukrainians along the way? So, while Ukraine is left to fight for its survival, the US is busy cozying up to Russia without Ukraine. Direct talks, backroom deals, the whole shebang. It's enough to make you wonder whose side they're on. In fact, Russia is trying to hold over 20% of Ukraine land, while US the money spent on Ukraine back. And then there's the whole Trump situation. Who is believed to have personal issue with Zelensky? Because, things weren't complicated enough. Imagine this, Trump now the US president. The very thought sends ripples through the political landscape, both domestically and internationally. He's already said he wants Ukraine to pay back every dime the US has given them. This isn't just a casual remark, it's a policy stance that could reshape international relations and Ukraine itself. That's $500 billion that Trump asking Ukraine to return, spent as aid. Folks, it's a staggering amount that could cripple an already struggling nation. Where the hell is Ukraine going to get that kind of money? The economic strain would be unbearable. They'd have to sell off what's left of their country or to be US-owned land. This could lead to a new form of economic colonization. The whole thing leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. It's a scenario that feels both unfair and inevitable. It's a story as old as time. Powerful countries making promises they don't keep, often leaving smaller nations in the lurch, leaving smaller nations to clean up the mess. The cycle of broken promises and shattered dreams continues. And while the world debates the geopolitical ramifications, the real impact is felt on the ground. The people of Ukraine are left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Their resilience is tested daily. It's a tragedy, no doubt, a human cost that is often overlooked in political calculations. But more than that, it's a cautionary tale. A stark reminder of the fragility of international promises, a reminder that in the game of international politics, trust is a currency rarely worth its weight in gold. The stakes are high and the consequences often dire. Only interests matter for titans. Thanks for watching. Like, share and subscribe. This is Wisdom Tales for Change. Stay tuned.